Open. I'm your host, Leonard Oliveras, and today we're bringing back a guest that's came on before. His name is William Ramsey. William Ramsey is an occult. Well, what would you call yourself, William?
I'm close to being an expert. I think that I've definitely done my fair share of research.
Right. So I had brought William on the show to come and talk about the occult Hollywood. So actually, I wanted to talk about the darkness that surrounds Hollywood and all the iconography and all the imagery that we see through Hollywood and just the role that it plays in everybody's psyche. I mean, obviously, when you're watching stuff, sometimes you can be watching a ritual without even realizing that you're watching a ritual being played out on the screen. So, William, thank you for coming back on the show. Let's talk about this. So what is Occult Hollywood?
So I made a documentary about 10 years ago, Occult Hollywood, and I just recently updated it. It's available on Vimeo, and it's really just a accumulation of information that I have keyed into over the last 15 years. And so just watching these things that the really kind of magicians, literal magicians using cinema are exposing and getting across through this medium to the public with a lot of times without their knowledge. So that's the occultism, and my goal was to expose kind of the hidden secrets, the numerology, the references in many films that are mysterious or were definitely mysterious to me by directors. So I broke it down by directors.
Right. So let's get into the beginning of this. How did the darker arts enter into the silver screen? How did this happen?
Well, that's a great question. I think that they were probably there from the very beginning, that people realized that this medium was a way or means not just to tell stories, but also impart esoteric information or concepts or Masonic concepts. So probably from the very early days of Black and White, probably even Metropolis, which was a German film that had a lot of Crowley OTO members were involved in the creation of that. It involves kind of like a slave colony, transhumanism. So I think from the very beginning, certain people were trying to impart knowledge, either whether they were interested in the occult or whether they were occultists themselves. So I think really from the beginning of cinema 100 years ago, that was evident.
Right. And we see a lot of reenactments done, like in secret societies. They're big on doing all these reenactments, and we see it even in some religious, people that they do reenactments, say like the Mormons or something like that. Sure. But we see a lot of like reenactments as far as the Freemasons, what they do. Even in black magic, there's reenactments. So what's the importance of these reenactments? Why? I mean, what power do they feel like they get out of this?
Well, I think that in real life, those rituals are a means to, break through to the other side, at least from my knowledge of Crowley. So I think that these are communication rituals, and also these rituals impart esoteric information depending upon what's involved in the ritual as well. So some of these are very obvious rituals, whether it's kind of Roman Polanski's Rosemary Baby or The Ninth Gate, or Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, which you reference in the title of your podcast. So I do think that Stanley Kubrick was a master occultist, and I was really shocked to find some of the kind of magical or Crowleyan numerology integrated into his films.
Now, why is there so many occultists in Hollywood? Are they trying to put a spell on all of us, all those people who watch the movies? I mean, what's going on there?
I think so. I think that there is also kind of an inside joke where they have their own secret knowledge. So people are putting in kind of Crowley's numerology, whether it's Oliver Stone, who a lot of people will probably be surprised to learn has an understanding of this kind of illumined numerology. And so people can see these references and tell what's going on. But I also think a lot of this is kind of definitely kind of an initiatory thing. I think Eyes Wide Shut is an initiatory type of show that doesn't people interpret it as merely an elitist film about how the elite operates in sex magical rituals. But I also think that it's about how society gets shaped by the elite, by occult principles and occult events, and really ties into all of this Jeffrey Epstein material, things like that. It's pretty surprising that Kubrick seemed to key into elite secret societies and depravity in that film, that was released in 1999.
Right. So, there's a lot of people that may say like, hey, William or Lenny, that's just craziness. All that stuff's not going to have an effect on me. What would you say to all the naysayers that would just poo-poo everything that we're saying, or that all the, the research that you put out? What would you say to them?
Well, I would suggest they check out my film, because I think that these films are really, they foreshadowed, and a lot of these directors knew that the events of 9/11 were going to happen, which to me were a mega ritual that involved black magic. But these movies of 1999 are really incredible. That includes Eyes Wide Shut, that was released in 1999, The Ninth Gate by Roman Polanski. We just passed the 50-year anniversary of the occult killings of Sharon Tate and Manson family killings. That was November 8th. So The Ninth Gate, Eyes Wide Shut, and Fight Club, which has a sequence that resembles the events of 9/11. That was also published in 1999. It involves human sacrifice, secret societies. When you really unpack it, it's pretty incredible what they're exposing to the public without really saying it. So the language of symbolism and events is really important. So I think that the people who do not believe that this is happening, or they're not these directors and writers are not exposing people to occult principles, I think they're naive.
Right. So what would you say to the person that's not privy to the information that we have, that sees this and is asking, well, what do you mean by a ritual? What do you mean that this is a ritual that they're doing? What does that mean?
Well, I think that definitely some of these films, some of the occult-themed films, the viewer is in a passive state. So they're really trying to draw in the information. And I think the power is in the hands of the director and the writer. So I think that in really overt ritualized films, I think that's really being imparted to the listener, whether it's, Eyes Wide Shut is pretty obvious. They have a sex magical ritual with 11 servitors. 11's the number of magic, number of the New World Order. So I think that you had I had this discussion with Seth McVeigh about how can you look at these shows, and even if they're fictional, some of the fiction are actually trying to tell fact, So you really have to have a critical eye when you look at these things. I don't look at them like I'm trying to adapt or practice the occultism. I just want to know that these people are imparting these ideas to the public. Like, I think Ninth Gate is really almost, you're following Johnny Depp through an initiatory phase to where he enters in through the Ninth Gate. And at the very end of that, he reenacts the marriage of the Beast and Lady Babylon at the very end, like something from the Book of Revelations. It's incredible. And something that Crowley wrote a ritual about. So you are definitely being exposed to that, whether you know it or not, if you watch that stuff.
Right. So are these rituals that they're doing, that they seem for themselves, they see as real, is it working on the society at large?
Absolutely. I think for sure. I think that these things some people are watching this and saying, how can I find out more about what you know? What are the secret esoteric knowledge? So I think that I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think that that's the intent of some of these shows, is to glorify. If you look at Rosemary's Baby, Anton LaVey was in that. It's to have sympathy for the devil. I think that's for sure. And I think that some of these are really important. Like, I talk about a guy a lot of people don't know about. His name was Donald Cammell. He was the son of a writer who knew Crowley, and Donald Cammell literally sat on the knee of Aleister Crowley. So he knew all of these secret doctrines. He knew about the assassins. He knew about nothing is true, everything is permitted, these ideas that go back to the Hashashin. And he's imparting it to people so that I think they can learn about it. So, and he was sympathetic to the occultists and thought of himself as a magician, magic with a K. So I think for sure they are definitely trying to initiate certain people to their worldview. And I think that that's the attraction of Hollywood. That's why some people go to Hollywood. Some people go to become stars. Some people go to make money, but some people go to practice their religion. I think that Hollywood is definitely not a place that's friendly to practicing Christians. So I think that that's kind of the secret hidden glass ceiling or occult ceiling that really exists in Hollywood, is that at the very top, these people are occultists. They're not Christians.
Well, even in the name Hollywood, right? Isn't that I've heard that was some type of wood that was used for a wand, right?
Right, for the Druids, correct. So I think they even got the name for this place that's always had this very strong vein of depravity and really questionable values from the very beginning, really from the last 100 years.
Yeah, when I heard about that, I thought that was very interesting that Hollywood used to be a wand, like a magic wand used by the Druids to be able to cast spells. And it's crazy because it's like they're basically saying that we're casting a spell by our wand, by we're putting on the silver screen. This is our spell catching to you.
Well, how effective is that propaganda? So even the CIA and some of these other intel agencies are supporting certain movies that are supposedly fiction, but they have themes and ideas in there that support the government. So there's a lot of this kind of magician propaganda things that are happening in Hollywood, and people need to be aware of that for sure.
And most human beings, when you go to a movie and you go to a dark room and you're watching a movie, a lot of the times your guard is down. You're just watching for entertainment. You're not your guard isn't up for what you're actually receiving, and not knowing that your mind is just soaking in everything. Not only your mind, but your spirit is soaking in everything. So, yeah, I can see how this has had an effect. Just even in my own life of growing up, I was born in '77, and as a child of the '80s and '90s, just seeing the difference to where we're at today. It's extremely different. And I always tell my kids, man, the stuff that you're watching, it has gotten darker, and it's just blatantly satanic and in your face.
Yes. I mean, look at this Sabrina the Witch that's on Netflix. These are all initiatory. They are bringing you into witchcraft. Witchcraft is now the number one religion among young girls here in LA, according to the facts that I've heard. And so I would think almost like the progression of Hollywood social engineering has just gotten worse and worse. So I think they really are socially engineering the public to accept the New World Order principles through cinema, through many of the cinematic things people watch today.
Right. So you're always writing about Aleister Crowley. So how does Aleister Crowley play into this?
Well, I think that Crowley himself, as somebody who would define himself as Satan's prophet, that's why I titled my book Prophet of Evil. I think that he was always trying to shape culture as well and socially engineer people. He wanted to create his own religion. And so I do think some of his followers are involved in this Hollywood environment, in this culture creation, in the cinematic environment. So I think Crowley's still relevant, particularly if you look at the events of 9/11. If you look at the movies I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of that same kind of numerology that is involved. I was surprised at how much Kubrick knew about this numerology. And you want to talk about ritualization or initiation, look at 2001. It's full of mysterious symbols. It promotes the idea of evolution, which I think will be totally debunked within 50 years. Now it's scientifically at the apex, but I think that through science itself, the ideas of Darwin will be totally discredited. He'll be considered somebody like Freud, like a kook. But so you see these ideas that are going through, and then man's journey into space is almost like a kind of a transition or a deification of man as he goes into the future, this guy Bowman or whatever. So I do think that the people, especially 2001, you're being brought into this worldview that is not consistent with the Christian worldview at all. And I think that Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote 2001, intended it that way, and I do believe that film itself predicted and foreshadowed that the events of 2001 were going to happen. So I do think that even back then, 50 years ago, there was some notion that this turn of the millennium was going to be an event that reshape the entire world.
Right. So we see, how we're going back from like the 30s and 40s and 50s and all that. We see how there used to be wholesome,
Right.
television, and now that's non-existent, man. So
Right.
as we know it now,
Right. The father is always kind of a buffoon in these comedy shows. He's not like a strong, stable type person. The mother, and almost all the Disney girls movies, the mom is not present. The girl is truly alone, and impressions are made upon them by somebody other than the family. So you see this anti-family attempt. So a lot of these things that are similar to cultural Marxism are also promoted in Hollywood. You're right. You see this progression. Like if you look at the 50s shows, totally different than today.
Right. Right. So, obviously we see a destruction of the family. Our family's being attacked on multiple levels, man.
Yes.
And, I always look at it like this. Our children are the ones that are being attacked. They are the target.
Yes.
They are the target of this attack because, this doesn't happen overnight. So this is something that it's like a frog in the kettle type of deal.
Yes.
It's slowly you see a lot of people when they hear this information, they kind of be like, well, okay, I seen this movie. How is that affecting me? Well, it's a form of brainwashing.
Yes.
You got to understand that.
Yeah.
It's a form of brainwashing. If you consume this type of media for 30 years, and you day in, day out, day in. I mean, a lot of people spend most of their time watching television,
Right.
I mean, hardly anybody goes outside anymore. A lot of people are in video games, and in video games, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I've seen some of my kids play video games, and I've seen these occult symbols in there. I'm like, what?
Have you seen?
Right.
Have you played Fortnite? It's full of teddy bears, just like from Eyes Wide Shut, which is a pedo symbol. There's all kinds of all-seeing eyes. There's all kinds of symbology in that game, and that's probably the number one game that these young 12, 11-year-old boys are playing. It's incredible.
Right, and before that was like World of Warcraft. That was number 1 too. Before that, and I don't know if you've ever seen that movie World of Warcraft, but that whole movie is just like one, opening a portal by using human or using death to be able to open a portal.
Really?
And these Nephilim-looking type of things coming into a portal.
I didn't know
it's
that.
Crazy, yeah.
Do you know that was directed by David Bowie's son?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so David Bowie's also, he was very familiar with the occult, and I part of my book, Children of the Beast, I cover David Bowie's occultism, so maybe it runs in the family.
Right. So we see a lot of sexualization of our children through all this media, plus this new occult that's just rampant in everything that you watch. You can't watch anything. You try to watch a show that has no sexual stuff in it or no occult symbols in it, and it's like pretty much impossible. Even cartoons, down to little cartoons,
Yeah.
and even down to little Peppa Pig and all, what the little kids watch. It's just full. They're starting young. They're starting to, because they know that the more that they chip away, chip away, there's a callousness that grows into a child, because once they see these symbols all the time, it becomes normalized. They're trying to normalize this type of lifestyle.
I totally agree. They're initiating them, yeah.
Right.
And there's like a recurrent sorry, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, well, I was going to say, those that have the Holy Spirit are able to see,
Right, I agree with that. Well, there's also a very disturbing undercurrent of pedophilia as well, and so some of these are there's like really disturbing references. Definitely Kubrick himself was probably a practicing pedophile, according to the information, and definitely Eyes Wide Shut has some themes in there that would shock the conscience. Like no kid should ever watch any of that. So there's a lot of strange things happening. And some of these Nickelodeon sets had a lot of inappropriate language that no 14-year-old should ever want to talk about. So there's some very disturbing stuff that Hollywood is subtly promoting.
Right, and I even seen stuff like in children's stuff, like I said, the Peppa Pig. I've heard that Peppa Pig was just actually a drawing of a male.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They just put 2 eyes and made it a pig. Yeah, so yeah, it's pretty insane, man. You know, you know the people that even that when I go to work and I talk to like fathers, and I always say you got to protect your children, man, because our children are the ones that are being attacked. Our children are the one that they're trying to sexualize. You know, at such a young age, man, such a
Super
young
young,
age.
yeah.
You know, yeah, I remember there was a cartoon called The Brats that used to come on, and there were these little girls dressed like prostitutes on there.
Right, I remember that.
And right, so it was kind of like a Barbie doll, but like the bad Barbie doll. But they were dressed in, you know, in small little tight clothing,
like skirts and stuff, right? Yeah, I remember that.
These are little kids playing with this, getting dolls to play with it. It has an effect on that child. You know, and us as parents, that we need to guard our children. That's our responsibility, you know, is to guard our children. You know, we can't do everything. You know, we can't. Your children are going to grow up and make their own decisions. But while they're in your care and while you have the ability to, you should.
I agree. Definitely protect is definitely one of the key components of being a parent for sure. Protecting, especially from pernicious ideas, dangerous ideas as well.
So what do you think, William? Do you think they're trying to make everybody soft to all this Satanism?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's it, is just break it down and break it down. Almost nothing coming out of Hollywood has a Christian theme in it, right? So even the X-Men itself comes out of kind of magical practices of these, of occultists. The guy who wrote the X-Men was involved with Peter Levenda, writer of the Necronomicon, and they were all in the same kind of magical social circle. So in some ways, there's some subtle effects. And the Seal of Babylon, Crowley's Seal of Babylon with that X and the O, is the same X and the O that's in the X-Men. So I do think that they're definitely trying to make changes in society, social engineering towards the occult. The occultists are doing the same thing. And I think that's part of their ultimate goal, really, is to change the entire culture, not just of the U.S. but of the world, into this kind of future new world order state where, you know, taking drugs is normal, sexual over-sexualization, magic, this whole worldview, I think, is really what they're pushing for.
Now, you mentioned Peter Levenda. What's your stance on Peter Levenda? Because I've heard him on a lot of Christian, you know, shows stating that, you know, he's just pretty much exposing what, you know, is, you know, writing about the inner workings of the occult. What's your take on him? You know, but he's always rubbed me the wrong way. I've read a couple of his books too. You know, I have a couple of his books.
I have his Sinister Forces series, so I've done that. And I've leafed through the Necronomicon. So the guy who supposedly wrote the Necronomicon, I forgot the pen name, but it's supposedly Peter Levenda. So he wrote this book based upon H.P. Lovecraft's books, right? So the Necronomicon is a book that's in Lovecraft's fiction, and he's always denied it. Levenda was on Coast to Coast, and he's clearly, obviously trying to shield his voice through some type of processor. And there's actually some paperwork, I haven't verified it, that has him as the writer of the Necronomicon. So it takes one to know one. A lot of these guys, Michael Cesarion, some of these other guys, the reason that they know about the cult and can talk about the occult is that they are occultists. And there's actually a video I can send you of an OTO ritual, and one of the participants is Peter Levenda. So, right. And it gets even worse, because when I wrote Prophet of Evil, you know, I was an independent writer, and after that came out, you know, I was just had no idea. I was printing out my first books, but there was a book that came after that, and it was published by Trine Day, who is supposedly like a truth-telling publication. Right. This takes a long time. The author was S.K. Bain, who literally worked for somebody who was on the project for the New American Century, right? The notorious project of the New American Century that they were looking for the next Pearl Harbor, and it was also ghost-written by Peter Levenda. And if you put the two books together, their book came out after mine, their summation is just a whole line of fantastical nonsense that nothing really ever came true. They came up with these ridiculous theories that did not stand the test of time. Like they were trying to numerologically predict things, And I think they said there was going to be a nuclear bomb that went off in Arizona or something like that. Total fantasy, total fear-mongering. And my finish of my book is really, if you read that, I would suggest you do it because it's a lot different than theirs. And I really still think my book stands up to the test of time because I showed that, George Bush Sr., who's dead, knew this kind of occult numerology, which was not in their book. So I do believe that it was kind of like a psyop and an intel op to kind of take an independent publisher like myself who really wanted to tell the truth and kind of spin it their way with a lot of things. So I think Levin was involved in that. I've been in contact with him. I have his emails and stuff like that. So for me, Levin is probably a practicing occultist. And there's actually audio of him doing gematria, like actually taking words and breaking them down into their numerical components and adding them together, something that is a magical practice that Crowley did. So,
wow, that's because I've heard him on a lot of like Christian people interviewing him, and I just always, I don't know, he just always rubbed me the wrong way. I've got some of his books, and some of his books are interesting, but at the same time, most people that are occultists, obviously they're liars, so lying is like one of the biggest things of what they do. So deception, man. So you have to be very careful. You have to walk and have eyes to see.
And if you read the Sinister Forces, there's all kinds of insider stuff and the sides and laughing jokes and stuff like that insiders would know. It's like a classic occultist, thing, like inside jokes that only occultists would know. So, you got to really look at Levin with some circumspection.
Now we look at Hollywood, how they portrayed witches and wizards and warlocks and all that, and it's always this weird looking fantasy thing. So when you think of people actually being witches, actually being warlocks, actually casting spells, Hollywood has painted a different picture than what it really looks like, right?
Well, I would say so. I mean, if you look at one of the most popular movies, series of all time, Harry Potter, they are casting spells. And so I was told by somebody that those spells are legit spells. So you want to talk about initiating an entire generation into witchcraft, Harry Potter is probably one of the biggest. And J.K. Rowling knew a lot. I'm surprised at how knowledgeable she was to be able to distill stuff down to Harry Potter, which, his wand is 11 inches long, the number of magic. His name is 11 letters long. Potter references alchemy. The alchemist takes the clay and molds it into gold. I mean, it's incredible. So you talk about these people. So they're reading this. They may not know anything about the occult or witchcraft, but if they ever pick up a book of alchemy or witchcraft, they go, oh, this is just like Harry Potter. This is the exact same themes and knowledge and all this stuff about herbs and things like that. Oh, this is right out. It's the same because it is the same, really.
Now, let me ask you, is there any such thing called white magic and black magic? Does that really exist, or is it the same spirit?
It's the same spirit. I don't think that there's anything biblical that allows for people to practice any type of magical practice. It's all biblical. And God of the Old Testament is the same as the New Testament in that those practices are forbidden. In the Old Testament, you get put to death if you practice magic. I do not promote those at all, and I do think that a lot of these people who are literally practicing black magic, if you read my book about Damien Eccles, who Abomination, Devil Worship, and Deception, his girlfriend said that he will tell people he's a white magic practitioner when he's a black magician. So I do think people use that as a deceptive tool, and they also put critics back on their heels. Oh, this is just white magic, it's good. So even a guy who's supposedly this old seer, this old wise man, Gerald Gardner, who started Wicca, got his OTO membership from Crowley. So he took some of the rituals from Crowley. So people go, oh yeah, Gerald Gardner's this cute little old man, and he was just doing these little white magician things. No, he wasn't. Not at all. And some of the Horn God stuff and all that, part of it comes out of Crowley. It goes back into old prehistory, but yeah, Gerald Gardner was not. So don't be deceived, man. When people say white magic, do not be deceived. I think they're trying to deceive people.
Right. Right. Anton LaVey said the same thing in the Satanic Bible that he wrote. He said the same thing, that white magic, black magic, it's the same thing. And he's laughing at it as he's writing it, saying that these people think that there is a difference. And there is no difference.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I mean, he said that himself in the Satanic Bible that he wrote. Right. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. Now, there's a lot of, occult practitioners, even in the military, that we see, not just in Hollywood. We see people like Jack Parsons of JPL. I always call JPL Jack Parsons Laboratory, even though it's called Jet Proportion Laboratory.
Well, that's actually a known nickname of it. They used to make a joke that it was Jack Parsons because he was one of the original founders.
Right, and so he was part of this, right?
Absolutely. Crowley considered Jack Parsons his number one disciple. And the Agape Lodge outside of Hollywood had all kinds of people. L. Ron Hubbard, supposedly Robert Heinlein, who wrote Stranger in a Strange Land, was kind of a devotee. And so Jack Parsons was very much involved. And there's a series now about his life called Strange Angel. And I haven't watched it yet, but it's supposed to retell his life. But also another person who was in the military was Michael Aquino, who was a psychological operations officer at a higher level. I think he's a colonel. And he wrote the Temple, he was a member of the Temple of Set, and he wrote a very interesting psychological manual that somehow got leaked or published, and it's called From PSYOP to Mind War. And it was really, the whole idea was just to constantly psychically drive people and never just think of it as one PSYOP and then do another PSYOP, but just make war against people's minds. And
right.
Pretty fascinating. So these Satanists, there are Satanists in the military, no question.
Yeah. So what did Jack Parsons, who was he? If people don't know or has never heard that name, who was Jack Parsons?
So Jack Parsons, his real name was Marvel. He lived in Pasadena. He lived in a huge mansion, and he said he actually saw the devil when he was 8 years old, and he became interested in the occult. He became interested in esotericism. His brand of the occult was the OTO, and he began practicing rituals and became a member of the Agape OTO Lodge in Hollywood. And it was literally right off of Hollywood Boulevard was where they would hold ritualized meetings. And he lived in Pasadena, so he was networking and talking with science fiction writers. And he was involved in early just testing and creating jet propulsion. So he created something called JATO, was Jet Assisted Takeoff, at the very early age of the aviation industry, credited it with kind of rocketry and things like that. He actually was in contact with Werner von Braun, who was out there in the JPL, right? So Werner von Braun was paper-clipped, brought to the U.S., and so these guys were in contact, and he became really a practicing occultist. He made take the oath of the Antichrist, which is, he basically said, I'm the next, he identified with Satanism, the Antichrist, and all of these evil things, and was going to fight against Christendom. And that's actually, you can find that writing. And he also did something called the Babylon Working with L. Ron Hubbard out in the desert, where they tried to invoke kind of like a magical being. And so Jack Parsons was really probably, he was supposed to be the heir of Crowley, and then he died in a mysterious bomb event that he blew himself up. He was actually always making bombs for all of his life, but it finally supposedly caught up to him. And so he was definitely a Satanist.
Right, and for those that don't know who L. Ron Hubbard is, he is the founder of Scientology, what we have now today, Scientology, yeah.
Correct.
So,
which is also black magic, Leonard. I mean, all these information that he took in his early lectures comes from Crowley. There's a significant amount that comes from Crowley. He references them in his lectures. There's audio of him referencing Crowley, included in my book, Children of the Beast, the verbatim words that he used. And his son wrote autobiography. He was basically kicked out of Dianetics. He said all that Scientology is black magic drawn out over a long period of time.
Right. And there's there's that big Scientology place over here in I believe it's like Hollywood over here.
Yeah. Oh no, they own tons of buildings down Hollywood Boulevard. So they actually bookend Hollywood Boulevard. There's some on I don't know if you know the area, but La Brea and Hollywood, all the way down through Vine, going east to west, and then on Sunset they have a huge Scientology building, Sunset and like Vermont. I don't know if you know that area.
Right. I know I've been down over there where they have that one that looks like a cross with the sun in the middle.
Right, this occult cross. I think that comes out of Rosicrucianism. Yeah.
Right. And it's very deceptive. You see that, you think of, okay, well, there's a cross, so it must mean Jesus.
Right. Well, and even a church, right? So they usurp the term church, which is truly a Christian Christian term, and so they were allowed to usurp that. They were allowed to get tax-free stuff. And how did they pull that off? I think it's important. If you look through, I've had the misfortune of actually reading through Hubbard's stuff, and he was anti-Christian. He was antichrist. He nakedly said stuff about God and Jesus. Well, I forgot the words verbatim, but he was definitely right in line with all the other Satanists, where they just did not identify with Christ at all, and that's very important for people to understand. That you want to talk about mind control, social engineering, Scientology. It's extremely sinister.
Right, and he was pretty much insane, man.
Out of his mind. I mean, he probably wasn't well from the very beginning of his life, and when he died, the rumor was he was giggling to himself and walking from room to room, and he was like Howard Hughes. His fingernails were like all the way down, a foot or two. Like, no, his fingernails weren't even cut, and they kept him in he was basically should have been in a mental institution. And he would do speed. He was like one of the most published people at one time, and he would do all these drugs and then go on these writing binges. Really crazy stuff. He's really a science fiction writer.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, everything that he wrote is science fiction.
Well, good point.
I mean, that's what it is. Right, it's all fiction. It's science fiction. That's what it all is, man. So it's crazy though, man. And then you're talking about Michael Aquino and all the stuff that he was involved with. Obviously, the Presidio over there in San Francisco, correct?
Right. So there was pedophilia allegations and things like that. Yeah.
Right, and who owns that now? Isn't there somebody from Hollywood who owns that area of that? What studio owns that now?
I'm pretty sure it was the one owned by the guy who did Star Wars. What was his name?
Right, I can't think of the name.
It'll come to me. But yeah, so it was not DreamWorks. It was another studio had a significant. I mean, it's a beautiful area. It used to be a military base, and so. Some people were allowed to purchase.
There goes a Hollywood tie right there, where somebody, an actual studio bought that property where all this stuff happened to these children.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's bad. And if you look at the Epstein stuff, there's some elements of occultism there. You had some kind of weird island with this blue and gold structure with a dome on top and all these owls, so it looks like some kind of old Egyptian religion. So you don't know what these guys were really practicing, what they really believed. Not yet, at least.
You see Jeffrey Epstein, how he just committed suicide. I think it's interesting. I hear a lot of people always saying, well, it must have been the Clintons that did it. But, he did a lot of blackmail on a lot of people, man, not just them. I mean, you even have our sitting president who was friends with him. Right. So it's just it's crazy, I mean, people like that. I mean, they're not allowed,
Good. No, I think that people say it's one person. What if he blackmailed 1,000 people? He was talking about people with billions of dollars, right. And there was actually, I mean, one thing that I've learned. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about stuff offline, but he angered a lot of people, and at a certain point, things can get done. I mean, just being associated with the Queen of England enough is dangerous enough. That family protects itself. Do you know the Queen of England has like the levels of her servitors are like all these landed barons who make loyalty oaths, and they're almost like Jesuitical. They have like an order of the garter that will dedicate their entire life to the maintenance of the Queen, and they wear a metal band that digs into their skin around their thigh as a remembrance and as a token of total fealty to the Queen.
Right, that's just making the Queen a god.
Almost. I mean, nobody knows how much she's really worth. So, anyway, they don't know. That I think all of the land. I have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure all of the people who owned land think they own land in the UK actually are leaseholds because she really owns the land. So they're really leasing it from her.
When is she gonna die? She seems like she's been alive forever.
They're gonna live forever, man. These people have the best health care in the world.
Right.
She's in her 90s. He and her and her husband.
She don't look like she's going anywhere anytime soon.
No way. But yeah, Epstein angered a lot of people. So you're absolutely right.
Right. You can't do that type of work and then threaten everybody, you know, and threaten like powerful people and thinking just because you have tapes in every room and all that. I mean, I feel, you know, I was talking to Johnny Cerrucci. I feel that they waited, you know, that he eventually got in trouble before and he only went to jail for 8 hours a day. You know, for 13 months or something like that. And he only went to jail 8 hours a day. But I think they waited to get all their material that they needed. And they finally locked him down and they said enough's enough. You know, this guy he's just talking too much.
Right. Well, he might have started saying, well, let's negotiate for my sentence. He might have been negotiating. I got stuff to negotiate.
Right.
And once people found out about that, like you're not, you know, in the mob, if you talk, you're in deep trouble. And so if he thinks he's going to talk and kind of people aren't going to find out about that or whatever, you're dealing with extreme, like the top tier power Epstein was associated with. A million people with a lot of money. And I mean, we can talk about stuff offline, but yeah, you're dealing with psychopaths, man. That you're dealing with psychopaths that say it's easier to kill 1 million people than to get them in line. So. Well, that's a good point. Do you know that they always had this blackmail in a safe in one of his properties? And they went back to the property. This is a rumor, but they went back. He and Ghislaine Maxwell went back to that property, and they had it like down in the safe, and all of the surrounding materials that kept the safe in place were gone. So all of this material that they had thought they had as blackmail was just disappeared. They don't even know who took it. So somebody else has part of his blackmail material, and the cops opened up his safe in Manhattan, which had other material, right? So it was just an ugly situation, you know. And people were definitely monitoring. I mean, very powerful people were monitoring like that. Yeah.
And that's interesting that you say that. So let's get into a little bit of that. How does blackmail play into the occult Hollywood aspect of things?
Well, I mean, I think that blackmail is really much more common than people might think. So I think that when you know, there's so many stories about people becoming famous in Hollywood and having to sell their soul or be involved in rituals or things like that. And I think a lot of that stuff is filmed, so people have dirt on them. I know that Scientology keeps dirt on a lot of its adherents, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a significant amount of blackmail and filming. Do you ever hear the story about Hugh Hefner? He was filming a lot of the stuff that happened in the Playboy Mansion, and he has an underground lair with all these tapes on all these people. So he had them blackmailed. I don't know if he ever used it, but he had all this stuff on very famous people who were engaged in activities at his place. And somebody who saw it said, if it was ever published, it would be worth $1 billion. Like that's the value, because it was like Marilyn Monroe and all these other people.
Right. I think they allow the blackmail of those people that are in Hollywood. But when it comes to like real powerful people, because those people in Hollywood, they don't have power. They're basically puppets. You know, they have to. They do what they're told, and they do. You know, they take their marching orders from somebody higher than them. So it's okay to blackmail people like that. And somebody like Hugh Hefner blackmailing all these stars. It's, you know, they use that, to say, well, we're going to out you, you know, and we have you with little kids or whatever it may be. You know, this is what we have on you. But yeah, I see that. You know,
but what if it was the opposite? What if somebody tried to blackmail somebody powerful like Hugh Hefner, somebody with income, with millions of dollars, with connections, with people? You know, look at actually what happened. You know that Jeff Bezos tried to get blackmailed. They had all these pictures of him with his new romantic woman. Like they had really incriminating stuff. They tried to blackmail him, and that never came out. So something happened. The wheels went in motion. That story went away. He had the best lawyers, same lawyers involved with Epstein. It was Boys, whatever, and then Marty Singer, who's like a well-known lawyer out here in Los Angeles. And that stuff went away. The Bezos, remember that story?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He was with that woman from that news anchor, right?
Yeah, KTLA. I forgot her name.
I used to see her all the time on there.
Do you know that she actually has a bit part in Fight Club?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you see my documentaries, you'll see her doing like her newscasting thing right before Smiley Face is shown. It's pretty incredible.
Wow. Yeah. So, you know, everybody, this Hollywood, you know, is filled with the occult. And, you know, I suggest people go and see your movie, your documentary, and read your books. It's a lot of it, when you read it, a lot of it's like, wow, is it really this much? And sometimes it's so much where it feels like, this can't be true. This can't be. But, think of this, everybody. Think of all the nations that were ever, that ruled the world at one time. And they all took marching orders from the occult. They all had these occult systems.
Yes,
all of them.
Yeah.
And
the Greeks, Romans, Carthaginians.
Right. And that's never changed. That hasn't changed. Just because people wear suits now and drive cars and wear a tie doesn't mean that it's changed. It's still the same.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah.
Right. So darkness is darkness no matter how you dress it up.
It's
still
like
darkness.
Mystery Babylon is still... That's moved along. Go see some of the occult buildings in D.C., man. Go look at the House of the Temple, the Sphinxes and all the Egyptian stuff. It's all there.
Right. I mean, just even, our American money, there's occult symbols on our money, on the one, especially the one, because the one means a lot,
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's hard to believe that there's that much. Like, I was a person who was not interested in it, but when you open your eyes wide open to all that, it's pervasive. It's shockingly pervasive, actually.
Right. And what it is, it's a spirit. So it's a spirit that begins to work in mankind. It's a dark spirit. And so that spirit begins to work in each and every one of the sons of disobedience. So those that are not, that don't have the Holy Spirit, they're easily influenced by this type of imagery, this type of magic that is being placed upon this world as we know it, and obviously this has some type of power because they put it on everything.
Yep.
Everything. I mean, you just think about it. If it has no power, if you think it has no purpose, then why is it on everything?
Right. Why is it on the back of the currency that we all need to survive, right?
Right. And trust me, when they say in God we trust, it is not the God of the Bible.
Well, you can read that doubly, right? That's truly
right.
an occult thing where there's an esoteric and an exoteric meaning. So,
right. It says one to the regular people, but those that are that are in the know that what it really means.
Well said.
So and I've always thought that when I was little, when I was a little kid and I read In God We Trust, I've always took it as, well, they stamped it on their God, which is money. Right. And their trust is in money. And, there's nothing. If you're a Christian, you believe we're in a Christian nation, and some part we used to be, right. But if you look at the currency, or you look at the people that were in higher ups, they weren't. Now the normal people may have been, right. The lesser people, the lower people, yes, they were. But they are the ones. See, those are the people that they're trying to control.
Right.
Because they know they can't outright just come out and say, okay, this is what it is, and now everybody, get in line, because people are not. There has to be a slow process, and you look at this slow process from the time that this country was made, until where we're at today. And there's always been a resistance, but the resistance is beginning to weaken very much. The more we're getting closer to the time of moving forward, the less the resistance. Yeah. And we, us, people like us doing podcasts, people like Williams out here, he's writing books, making documentaries. This is the resistance. This is what it is. Before in the past, it was a bigger voice. There was a larger voice to say no. But that power has always been there. It's just been silent.
Right. Now, it's an occult power, right? It's a secret, blackmail. Yeah.
Yeah. So occult means hidden. So it's hidden. But now they're getting bold to the point where they feel like they can start revealing things and to the culture, and there's no reaction from the culture when they reveal these things. There's nobody going and trying to burn down the White House, or like the images that we would see in the past, people coming with pitchforks and their farming equipment ready to burn the thing down. It's not happening no more.
Right? No, it's not.
We don't see that. It's because it's the frog in the kettle. People are getting you're being indoctrinated since you were little. I always tell people, you have been indoctrinated even when you were in your mother's womb. when you were being created in your mother's womb, you've been indoctrinated by what your mother was seeing, by the conversation your mother was having, by the music your mother was listening to, by the movies she was watching, by the relationships that she kept with people, whether it be good or bad. All that was feeding into the child, feeding into you as a baby. So you've been, I tell people, you've been indoctrinated since even before you were born.
It's a scary thought.
It's a scary thought, man. And this is, and the thing to do though is to do the right thing. You can't be afraid to stand up for what's right. I always tell my kids that. Don't be afraid to stand up for what's right, even if it causes you to lose your life. You have to. Even if it causes you to lose your life, you always stand up for righteousness. You always stand up for the little guy. You always stand up for those that are getting bullied against. You always stand up and you say no. Because why? Because you have the Holy Spirit. God will protect you. If it's your time to go, then God will say, so be it. Let's go. Time to come home. But you have to be ready. You can't just, you have to have yourself guarded. You have to stay ready. I always tell people, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. You don't have to worry about it. If stay in season, even when you're not in season, always be ready. Always have a word. Always be ready to show love. And showing love doesn't mean that you're soft. Doesn't mean that you're gonna be walked over. No. Stand up for righteousness. Start with your kids. A lot of people may say, well, what can I do? How can I affect change in this world? Start at home first. Yeah. Start with the people around you, whether it be your co-workers. Just let them see your life with Christ. Let them see that. Let that just come out of you. The Bible says out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth will speak. Just let them see that. You don't have to say, hey, you're going to hell. Hey, this. You don't have to do all that. Right. Just be friendly, and then they know who you are, and that right there is a testimony. Start right there.
Well said. Very true.
So, William, what could we do? What is your advice as far as all the research that's how has this research affected you? How has this affected you?
Well, I think it's like my eyes are wide open. Like, I think that at a certain point in my life, I really understood nothing about the world. I really was very naive. I believe what I wrote in my high school textbooks. So I think that really understanding, I think for me it really started with reading the Bible and praying, because I realized that there's a completely opposite reality than the one that I was presented with. So that made me look at things from a completely different perspective. So I think that realizing that all these even events have occulted interests or influences, and these films that have occult influences, knowing that would help you avoid, supporting these types of artistic works and really trying to keep you on the straight and narrow path. And I think that that's really the benefit of having that knowledge. I probably wouldn't have written these books if that more people were saying that this is happening, but I felt like this was something that needed to be said. So I think that that's why I made the books and the documentaries. Is like, here, this is it. This is happening. What do you guys want to? What do you want to do about it?
Right. I always say that, once you have the information, it is your responsibility to have action, to act upon the information that you have. This information serves no purpose if you're just using it as an entertainment value. If you're just using it as, this is something I just want to listen to, and wow, it's pretty provocative, and that's as far as it goes. Right. No, don't let it just stop right there. It has to move you to action. Like I said, you can be that change. You be the change with who at home, who's around you, who's in earshot of you. Be that change. You don't have to go and do big things in order to change. You change that one person. That one person might change 1,000 people.
Well said. Very true. Yeah.
That's what you focus on. You focus on, hey, if God sent you over here to speak to one person, you don't know who that one person's going to affect. You just got to be obedient. Learn this information, do something with it. And the thing to do is protect yourself. And if you have small ones, please, please protect your children. Protect them. They're going to grow up one day, and they're going to do what they do. I always tell my kids, you know what? You can have the best parent in the world, like Adam and Eve. The best parent. You can still fall away.
It's true.
They had God as their parent, and they still fell away. What did God do wrong? Nothing. Didn't do anything wrong. It's just by choice. But you still have to give your children the tools. Still do. Even if they're going to fall away. You trust and you believe in your heart that God will bring them back. Hopefully God will bring them before they die. Hopefully, they get to the point where they fall on their face and they say, okay, God, that's it. I'm done.
Right.
Done.
That's not uncommon. That's if that happened to me, probably something like that.
Right. But see, that shows God's faithfulness.
Right. True.
Even when you're going through it, you don't feel like God is faithful. But then when you come out of it, you're like, thank you, Lord. Because if it wasn't for that, I'd be destined for hell. I'd be destined for eternity away from you, from separation. And the thing is that we need to get people. We need to be the vessels that the Holy Spirit can use to speak to those people that are around us. This work that William is doing, this is some heavy work. A lot of the stuff that he has put out, it was very eye-opening for me, to who I am today. The work that he has done has shaped, of my thought process, has opened my eyes and opened my heart to things that I didn't realize that were around me. I always had an eye and an ear for it, but I didn't realize just how deep this rabbit hole went. And if you want to really get deep into the rabbit hole, read his books, watch his documentaries, and you just see how far this stuff really goes. And it goes a lot deeper. And, it's a sickness, man. It's a sickness.
But did you feel like it confirmed your biblical worldview?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. It actually made it even stronger. I always say this, that when you realize that there is darkness, then you realize that there is light. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
You realize that there is a devil, then there's got to be a God. You realize how much these people are doing so much to bash Christianity and to bash Jesus. Why? You don't see them doing that against Muhammad.
True.
You don't see them doing that against Buddha. You know what I'm saying? Like, they are dead set against Jesus.
Yes.
Jesus. Why? You have to ask yourself, why? Why don't I hear things about Muhammad? Why don't I hear things about Buddha, Krishna? Why don't I hear things about all these other world changers, so to speak? Why is it always Jesus? Why? Ask yourself that. Even if you're a non-believer, you don't believe in God, ask yourself. These people, they believe it. They believe that they know who Jesus is, and they're dead set to war against him.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
That's what they want to do. They know who Jesus is. You may not, but they do, and that's who they're warring against. So,
amen.
Yeah. So you got anything else you want to say, William?
No, man. I think we covered all of it. I really appreciate you having me on the show. My movies are available on Vimeo. You can just type in William Ramsey, Occult Hollywood. I've done some true crime stuff. I've done some research into Epstein. You can look into some of my Epstein stuff on my YouTube channel, William Ramsey Investigates. But thank you very much, Leonard. I appreciate being back on your show.
I appreciate you coming on, man. I really do. I think that your information is valuable. Like I said, it was a big part to me waking up, your information, and it helped. It shaped the person who I am today, and God bless you for that. And I just want to thank you, from the bottom of my heart for just putting in the man hours and the work. And I know it must have been hard. And I know there's been massive attacks against you. And I thank you for being faithful, man. Because
God bless you, man. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Your faithfulness helped the edification of the body of Christ. Believe that.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. I'm Leonard Oliveras, and this is Eyes Wide Open. Thank you, and God bless.